Hi everyone. Just wanted to talk to you for a few minutes about the research reports that you have to make for lab. And this is a report, obviously, that you're writing collaboratively. So I wanted to talk about that specific aspect of the writing for a little while. And how kind of I expect that to go and what I want you to get out of it. Because this is a particular type of writing. It's very different than writing alone. It's different than, okay, I have a paper due tomorrow, I'm going to write it, and you put your thoughts onto a paper. Hopefully you looked at my other tips on writing that I posted about, writing crappy quality stuff and then revising that stuff. You can use those tips here too, but there's also this other aspect where you're writing together. So for this particular class, what I'd like you to do, the way I'd like you to approach the paper is there's four main sections to a research paper, of course, right? There's the intro, the methods. I'll write these out. Intro, methods, results, and discussion. And there's different ways to approach this. One thing you could do is have each of you, if there's 4 people in your group, each one writes one section, and then so everyone takes a crack at developing the first draft of a section. You could kind of decide who gets what section. That's fine. Different sections are harder or easier than others, but in different ways. So I think the methods is definitely the easiest section to write, because it's just you describe what you did in your study, and of course you'll have done your study at that point. Everyone in your group should be able to do that. So it's fine. Maybe you want to do that way, and one person gets a little lucky if they get the method section, and that's easy for them. The intro, different people feel differently about this. The intro, I feel, is the hardest section to write, because that's the part where you really have to think and make your study make sense to other people, and there's lots of different ways to do that. So you go back and forth, and how am I going to make this story? It's kind of like you're taking your data, which is presented in your results, and making it into a story, so that by the time you get to the results section in the paper, you're like, this really sounds really important and cool. And then the discussion is really just you're commenting on the results. You're the first person in the world who gets to comment on what these results might mean. So that's basically what the discussion is like, what do the results mean? And how do they fit in with other similar studies that have been done, other related studies? And one more thing in the discussion, usually the first thing is a summary of the results. Usually the first paragraph is that. So that's really the discussion. The intro usually has 3 sections to it too. It says what we know, what we don't know, and what we did in this particular paper. Obviously, there's lots of things we don't know. We don't know the meaning of life. Don't put that in there. Make it relevant. What we know about depression and cognition, if your study is on depression and cognition. What we don't know, which is presumably what you did in the study, is basically what we didn't know yet, and then you describe what you did. So these are both really hard. So another way to do it, the intro being the toughest, maybe you could have 2 people take a crack at drafting the intro, and then you kind of integrate those 2 drafts that people did independently. And same with discussion. 2 people could do the discussion, and you could kind of work together on these other 2 sections. I'll also be available by Zoom if you guys want to do the results together real quick. We'll kind of have a meeting. We'll do stats together. And I bet once you've collected your data, we can draft the results in a 40-minute Zoom meeting. So I'm happy to do that. Yeah, but that's all the things you're going to be writing. And the idea is I want you all to draft at least one substantial part of your paper. And even if it's redundant, if 2 people draft the intro, that's okay. If 2 people draft the discussion, that's okay, and then you integrate. those. You're going to be passing in one final version of your paper. But I want you to not only draft, but I also want you to edit each other's work. So once you've written something, you're going to send it to the rest of your group, and everyone's going to take a pass at reading through what you wrote and editing it, suggesting changes and so forth. And this is part of science. Every person on the authorship team is supposed to read the entire paper and give their 2 cents. And sometimes you might have disagreements about the way something should go, and you have to go back and forth on those and compromise and stuff and make it work. And that's part of the experience I want you to have, because that's definitely a big part of doing science, is working together in a group of other scientists and coming to an agreement and making each other's work better. I mean, always when you're writing with other people, the work is going to be better than if you wrote it by yourself, because we all have blind spots, parts, things that we didn't realize that weren't clear and stuff, and we can help each other be clearer and better. So that's what kind of just a glimpse, I guess, of what I hope the scientific writing is like. I hope that this may, because I was just kind of speaking offhand here, realizing I should post this video. So if there's questions you have, if this raises questions for you, please shoot me an email, and I'd be happy to discuss further or to clarify, what I mean by things. But hopefully this gives you a sense of how the writing should go for the research reports. All right, so I realized that I should probably give you a little more structure on the methods and results, since I gave you kind of these are kind of like 3 subheadings basically, in your intro, what we know, what we don't, and what we did. Usually people don't put that for an actual like subheading of the section in italics, but that is the underlying structure, even though they don't have these subheadings that says what we know and what we did. For the discussion, you may have subheadings. Usually there's no subheading for the first part. You just kind of say discussion, and then you summarize the results. And then you have questions that are a little more specific than this, but basically they are these questions of what the results mean and how they fit in with prior studies. So subheadings, I think, are great for the discussion, and the methods and the results. So for the methods, here are some subheadings that you can probably use. This will help you to feel like the methods is a little more approachable and manageable. So one subheading is going to be participants, where you say, who the people were in your study, their average age, their average education, how many subjects there were, how many males and females. That's probably about it. And if there was a patient population at all, like, how many had depression and how many were controls or whatever. I don't think any of you are doing patient studies, but there may be something else like that you can put in the participant section, again, just describing your sample. Next, another section would be measures. So if you're doing questionnaires, you could put a section on like the questionnaires you use. So we use the NEO, which is this questionnaire, blah, blah, blah. You can cite the original article that invented the NEO or whatever, Costa and McRae, I think. And because a lot of you are using the NEO, I mentioned that. But if you're using one for anxiety, the Beck Anxiety Inventory or whatever, mention that, cite Beck, etc. So people know what questionnaires you give. And then you could have a section on stimuli. You only need this if you're doing like a perception task, like if you're doing the Necker cube, or you're doing like a visual short-term memory task or a motion perception task, something where, what you're showing you're showing the subject on a screen and they're making judgments about the thing you're showing them, you would want to have a stimuli section. If you're not doing that, you don't need a stimuli section. You might have a task section that describes what they did with the stimulus, or if there was some sort of cognitive task that they had. If you're doing the Iowa gambling task, you could have a section on task and say what the Iowa gambling task is all about, or whatever task you did. Then you can have a section called procedure, where you basically describe how this stuff all worked. So you say, subjects came into the lab, and after they filled out informed consent, they were screened to see if they, were disqualified from the study for any reason. And if they were in fact eligible, then we gave them the Beck Anxiety Inventory, which we already described, and the NEO, and then we sent them on their way, and they were debriefed because we lied to them or whatever. Just say what you did with your subjects. And that should be good. I think that's pretty good structure for the methods. For the results, this one's a little harder for me to tell you what to do because it's really just you're telling the story of your data. So let me give you a few subheadings that could be things that people use in a lot of studies, but these won't necessarily all apply to you, but maybe some of them will. One would be just to say sort of describe your basic like results. Like if you had people take a questionnaire, the average score on the questionnaire was blah blah blah. The average score for neuroticism was blah blah blah. For extroversion, it was blah blah blah. And you just kind of say mean and standard deviation. You kind of do descriptive statistics, meaning mean and standard deviation is usually fine. That might be one subheading, is descriptive statistics or something, or basic results. And then you have another section where you're probably the relation between X and Y. So a lot of you are comparing two different things, like a questionnaire and a perceptual ability, or a questionnaire and some behavior. So you're going to have a section on relation between questionnaire and behavior. That's probably good for that. These are probably going to be your only two things you have. I mean, a lot of times for my studies, I have like a section that not only does descriptive statistics, but it's comparing two groups. Because I have like a depressed group and a healthy group, and they both did this perception task. And so I would have a section on comparing the two groups. I do t-tests or whatever, or ANOVAs. But you guys, I don't think any of you are doing two different groups. Maybe some of you are, so you can do this if you're doing groups, but I can't think of any of you that are doing groups. So anyway, these are just some of the things that you could do for like a paragraph on this and that. Results doesn't have to be too long. It's great if you can, for your relation, if you're doing a relation thing, you should totally do a plot, like a scatter plot. You can do it in Excel, which is terrible, but it works. Or you can do it in something else, at some other graphing program you are familiar with. Or if you don't know how to do it, you can just ask me. I know how to do a lot of them. But yeah, a picture is worth 1,000 words. So I think if you can have at least one figure in your results showing a relation, like a scatter plot, or the difference between two groups or something, or group means, that would be good. That's all I'll say for now. All right, so one thing I forgot to mention is that I'd like you to use track changes for your writing. And what that means is, see in this document here, this is a paper I recently wrote, the changes that one person makes are shown in blue, and the changes that another person makes are shown in another color, so you can tell who does what. Now to do this, you go to Review, Track Changes, you click on that, and then you click on Track Changes, like I'm showing you here, and then it will show all the changes. Normally, the default setting is that everyone who works on the document, it just shows in black, but if you turn on Track Changes, then you can see who did what. So now you see I am logged in as a different user, and it's coming up as red, and you could ultimately accept this change by clicking Accept, but then it would no longer show who did what. Or actually, you might want to reject that change because it doesn't make any sense. It's just a bunch of letters. So that's what Track Changes does. You scroll down, you can see there's a bunch of text someone added. It shows who changed the format of text and fonts and stuff. Of course, that doesn't really matter. Well, now let me show you how to do this in Google Docs, which you may be more comfortable with for working on a project with a team or not. The old-fashioned way is, of course, to just do it in Microsoft Word and then email each other the version of the paper, but that gets a little clunky when you're all working on different sections of it. So some people like to do Google Docs, which is fine, because there's also a way to demonstrate who did what in Google Docs. Normally, this little thing on the upper right here is set to editing. If you do editing, it doesn't show who did what, but if you set it to suggesting, then now it does show who did what. And even if you delete something that someone else wrote, it shows who deleted it and stuff. So this would be a way that you could then share that doc with me, and I'd be able to see who did what. So that is the point. Again, just so that I can tell, that you're all contributing, that you're all drafting your own stuff, that you're all editing each other's stuff. This is the way that this project should be. Are all supposed to be taking the bull by the horns and doing important things on the writing.